ओम परतत्वे सदा लीनो रामकृष्ण समाज्ञया यो धर्म स्थापन रतो वीरेशम तम नमाम्यहम. We are studying here Swami Vivekananda's Jnana Yoga. Little external information I would like to give, as I had given in the beginning of Practical Vedanta, that these lectures, if you open the contents, then the lectures from Cosmos onwards, lectured from the Cosmos onwards, are delivered in New York. Chronologically, they are earlier. January and February 1896, Swamiji has given lectures on Jnana Yoga in New York, and a few of them have been included in this book, starting from the chapter Cosmos. Before that, Swamiji's lectures on Upanishads, given in London, June to November 1896. June to November 1896, Swamiji had given a series of lectures on Upanishads in London. And there, from this first chapter, which we read, Necessity of Religion, right up to the lecture on freedom of the soul. So, they are, yes, the freedom of the soul is the last lecture, and that last lecture, dated 5th November 96, was on Chandogya Upanishad. And then the further lectures on Chandogya Upanishad we already dealt with in the book Practical Vedanta. That is the chronology a little. Now, coming to this Swamiji's Jnana Yoga, having read the first lecture on the necessity of religion, where Swamiji has pointed out that man cannot remain satisfied with his five senses. The real man, which Swamiji has defined. Who is a man? Man is man so long as he struggles to rise above nature. And this nature is both internal and external. This is Swamiji's definition of a man. Man is man who struggles. Struggle, when it stops, it is difficult to call him a man. He has become God. And if the struggle is not there, difficult to call him a man. He is either a machine or a just existing being, animal. So, this is Swamiji's definition of a man. So, there is this struggle to go beyond senses. That is what Swamiji has told us. And the struggle to go beyond senses goes in two directions. What is real in my body? One direction. What is real beyond the outside nature? That is other direction. And both these searches Swamiji has shown meet in only one point. And that point can be called Saguna Brahman, a personal God, or Nirguna Brahman, the absolute reality, or by different names like moral law, or these are all unit abstractions. That means all this reaches only one reality. Give it any name you like. That is what Swamiji has said. Then, in the second part, after telling that this utilitarian theory has no rationality, and so man's struggle for infinitude must be included while we think of man. We cannot think of man just as a part of society of today, because there was no society in the beginning. And Swamiji said this is a passing phase. There may not be no society afterwards. So society in the present form, we should not give much importance to, if we want to see the man's struggle towards infinity. And if a man succeeds in the struggle towards infinity, partially even his character becomes so strong that the society itself changes before him. So, that is the Indian style or Swamiji style. One is struggle to go beyond senses. The other definition is that struggle for infinity. And this struggle for infinity is the only valid struggle in human life. All other struggles have only one meaning, that man is struggling. That much is proved by his other struggles. But the real struggle is struggles towards the infinity. This much we have seen in Swamiji's Necessity of Religion. Now, we come to the next chapter today, the real nature of man. This title itself suggests so many things to us. What it suggests? That today, what we feel or think, I would rather say what we know about ourselves and the world which we live in. So what we think or feel or know about ourselves is not real nature. The very heading that Swamiji is proposing to show us the real nature automatically means that today what we are seeing or thinking or feeling or experiencing is not our real nature. First point. Second point is that because it is not our real nature, it is the source of every trouble in our life. It is the source of every trouble in our life, that we are basing our whole life on our unreal nature which we experience today. So the next point is that we have to struggle to get our own real nature. Then our life will be fulfilled. This we get only from the heading of the chapter. Then we see that this lecture is based upon the Katha Upanishad. Swamiji is taking now Upanishad by Upanishad. And so brilliant is this Swamiji's dealing. He is not translating word by word. He is not ratiocinizing much. He appeals to our reason and then takes us high. Swamiji is a Brahmagyan. Swamiji is a Gyan Yogi par supreme, and he has the power to lift our minds to the reality. That is the real understanding. Our intellect understanding is of not much use. We must experience that. And Swamiji's force, Swamiji's personality forces us to rise above. And when the consciousness rises to another level, then only we comprehend what Swamiji is talking. And we know that this force is so much that Romarola said after 30 years of these lectures, he got them in print and said, "You want to touch these lectures after 30 years, sends a thrill in my life." So what to talk of those who heard it livingly from the hero? So, we, now 30 years Romarola said, now 1896 means more than 100 years, but they are as fresh as then. And so, we also feel a thrill. We also are lifted above. Who is the adhikari for listening this? One who is ready to be lifted above by the Guru Swami Vivekananda. That is the adhikari. One who tries to intellectually understand this is not the adhikari. One who is ready to be lifted by Swamiji's force toward the higher consciousness is the adhikari here. And so, what is the prayojan? We want to realize our real nature. That is the prayojan. That is the prayojan. That should be the prayojan in every effort in our life. We want to realize our real nature. And how? By the force which is Swamiji. By the force which is Swamiji, who is talking only about the Upanishads. Upanishads are the original source. What are Upanishads? Upanishads are that force which lifts a man towards his real nature. That is the very definition of Upanishad. And a person who has assimilated all of that and has realized the goal of life by the grace of his Guru, Bhagavan Sri Ramakrishna, has the power to lift ourselves up to that level, and we have to be ready. How? By listening to Swamiji's lectures, by trying to assimilate the ideas given therein. So, we come to this lecture, the real nature of man, based upon the Kathopanishad, and those who want to find the chronology, please note down. Please note down that this lecture was delivered in London on 21st June 1896. I told you June to November is the period of these lectures. Now the exact date of this lecture is 21st June 1896. Now we come to the lecture. Great is the tenacity with which man clings to the senses. This is the universal experience. Man clings to his senses with tenacity. He does not want to give up his attachment to the senses, and through the senses to the objects of the world. So, and that sticking to the senses, in that respect, man has tenacity. Great is the tenacity with which man clings to the senses. Yet, however substantial he may think the external world in which he lives and moves, so through the senses what we do? Mix with the external world. And we take the external world to be absolutely real. And Swamiji says, however substantial he may think the external world in which he lives and moves. Substantial means real. There comes a time in the lives of individuals and of races when involuntarily they ask, is this real? Involuntarily means there comes a time when they have to ask whether it is real. What is that time? Death. Death is very important in life. In this respect, one incident I will tell you. Swami Vivekananda, after he returned from the West, there would every day assemble, young college students would assemble around him and he used to talk. One day, he put a question, what is the noblest thing in life? The boys could not catch his drift, they could not answer. And he himself replied, death. Death is the noblest thing in life. Then they were shattered. They said, but we always think of death, then we will become pessimistic, we will become cynic. Swamiji said, yes, it will be a death to all your worldly ideas. But if you sustain in this thought, then the new world will rise for you. The new world will rise for you. So in many cases we see that what we think of auspicious in the worldly life, the auspicious in spiritual life is totally different, sometimes opposite to it. In the world, somebody mentions death, they would say it is inauspicious. And so we have derived so many words. He has passed away, he has gone to heaven, and hundreds of things, because we are afraid to hear that he has died. But in spiritual life, the whole Kathopanishad is based upon this fact. And we know that Edwin Arnold, who translated this, has called it the Song of Death, the Kathopanishad. So, death is the central point. That is what Swamiji is bringing us to, and says at that point, every human being involuntarily has to ask, is it the end? Is it real? All the effort of life gone in 1 second. Was the effort of life for that? So much struggle in the field of science, arts, education, so much struggle. It ends in death. What is the use? So one must think what is beyond. Then only the life gets a meaning. And so, he says in the race also, a race means a particular community, a particular nation, sometimes use the race. Now this race, when the death comes, all people have to think, is that the end? The race is struggling for the worldly progress. And at the death, where has it gone? So, there comes a time in the lives of individuals and of races when involuntarily they ask, is this real? To the person who never finds a moment to question the credentials of his senses. Credentials means whether our senses are showing us the reality or unreality, we never ask. We take it for granted that what the senses are showing is real. That is called, does not find a moment to question the credentials of the senses, whose every moment is occupied with some sort of sense enjoyment. Even to him, death comes, and he also is compelled to ask, is this real? Religion begins with this question and ends with its answer. This is religion. Religion is not certain observances, certain merits and demerits. That Punya religion is a different religion, not religion in Swamiji's words. So religion starts with this question, death. Is there something remaining or has everything gone? And ends with its answer. Ends when the purpose of religion is served if man finds the answer to this question. The purpose of religion is to lift the mind, lift man above this death. And so the question is the beginning of religion, and the struggle is to get the answer, and when he succeeds in getting the answer, then that purpose of religion is over there. Religion is not just observances to be observed throughout life. Religion is the struggle. When the result is obtained, there is no more struggle. Even in the remote past, where recorded history cannot help us, in the mysterious light of mythology, you see, people started recording history at a particular point of time. But before that, what we have? Mythology. That means history told in story form. That is mythology. Exactness as we think of history today is not there. In the mysterious light of mythology, back in the dim light of civilization, that means man has been born on this earth. We find the same question was asked, what becomes of this? What is real? Because the Upanishads belong to the very ancient literature. So Swamiji is telling that even in those times, the question is raised. What becomes of this? This means our body, our experienced world. When a man dies, where is the world for him? So what has become of it? What is real? Real is that which will sustain itself. Real is not that which will end. Real is that which will sustain itself. So what is that? That only makes the life meaningful. One of the most poetical of the Upanishads, the Katha Upanishad, begins with the inquiry. Swamiji is calling Katha one of the most poetical Upanishads. What is poetry? Poetry is not imagination. Poetry is not what we call the modern poetry. Poetry means when the struggle for supersensuous grows in man and his experience crosses this mundane level, then that experience is so much intense that it comes out as poetry. That is poetry. And one of the most poetical of the Upanishads is Katha Upanishad. What is his name? Katha Upanishad derived from? It is from the Krishna Yajurveda. Kataka or Katha is the name of a particular branch of that Veda, and this Upanishad is found in that. So it is called Katha Upanishad. Upanishad means that knowledge which if we approach with love and firm resolve, steadfast resolve, it will take us beyond our ignorance, it will get us our real nature, and it will loosen all our bonds and will become free. That is called Upanishad. And because of the different minds, there are different Upanishads. And so, Katha Upanishad is one of the most poetical of those Upanishads. Begins with the inquiry, when a man dies, there is a dispute. One party declares that he has gone forever. That party which sees superficially feels that he is gone forever. The other insists that he is still living. We see he is dead, but they feel that there is something in it which is not gone. And it is something in it which has not gone. That is the real nature of man. And we have to find out what it is. Which is true of these two parties? Various answers have been given. The whole sphere of metaphysics, philosophy and religion is really filled with various answers to this question. Metaphysics means physics talks about matter and energy, but meta means beyond this. In the subtler region, what is this world made of? Mind. What is the mind made of? Buddhi. Like that. That is called metaphysics. Metaphysics means transcendental physics-like study. Transcendental, beyond the senses, study of this world. That is metaphysics. Philosophy is intellectual attempt at getting at the truth. Philosophy means intellectual attempt at getting at the truth. And religion is realization. Religion is that force which lifts us above. So the whole sphere of metaphysics, philosophy and religion is really filled with various answers to this question. So all these three sciences, they struggle to give us the answer to this question, that whether everything is gone or something remains, and if something remains, what is its real nature? That is what these three sciences are filled up with. At the same time, the other side. At the same time, attempts have been made to suppress it, to put a stop to the unrest of the mind which asks what is beyond, what is real. People in the world have devised a word totally wrong. Those who think of God or spiritual life are called as escapists by the worldly people. But actually, those who do not struggle for truth are the escapists. Because they cannot go beyond the senses, they think, let us not go, let us not go, let us escape. Tenaciously they stick to the senses. This is escapism, mind you. So Swamiji is telling, attempts have been made to suppress it, to put a stop to the unrest of the mind which asks, in my own life, I'll tell you 2-3 experiences. I was in Patiala. There is a Vedanta society in Patiala. And the founders are those who are running the society, Dr. R.L. Mittal and Radhatai Mittal. In their house, they have a big hall. And when I was in Chandigarh, I used to every month go and lecture there. And lot of people, 80-90 people used to come. They asked questions, I could reply. But at the end, their middle daughter, Pritha by name, she and some of her companions stayed back and said, we have a question. I said, what is the question? They told me that we feel that everything in this world is hollow, zero. And we are afraid of our thought. And when we tell it, people say, you are mad, don't think like that. But we have that thought. I told them, so everything is futile in this world. I told them, you have come to this point because you have come to the state where you feel that you are dealing with shadows in this world. But if there are shadows, there have to be shadows of a reality. There cannot be shadows without a reality. And if that reality you will be able to catch, you will never feel it is meaningless or effort. This has no purpose in life that you will not feel. And that changed the thought process of those girls. I thought that the girls are getting awakening. I call this as awakening. I told the girls, your thought is not wrong, it is half thought. This is the thought Buddha has given us, that the world is not real, that it is a shadows. But you must know that shadows are the shadows of some reality. And that Vedanta will tell you. That Sri Ramakrishna and the Holy Mother will show to you. I thought, is this awakening among girls? In Chandigarh itself, one of the known old devotee, I remember, Professor N.K. Sharma, and his son, who was a student of engineering, they came. And the father is telling me, see this son, what he talks. He said there is nothing meaningful in the world. I tell him, there are so many good things in the world. The boy replied, Father, you inject goodness in a thing and call it good. Inherently there is nothing good there. I told the father, you are asking me to reply to your son, but I am compelled to tell you that you have to modify your thought. And what the son tells is correct. After some time, I went to Goa. And a small girl, she was in the 8th standard at that time, she asked me the same question, that is this world not hollow? Is all this thing not futile? To her also I told the same thing. Try to catch the reality, then you will not feel like that. So, what happens? This is what I am trying to tell is, this is awakening coming to the young, fresh minds. But then there is parental pressure, peer pressure, forget about it. See what are the good things in life and follow them. Media, peer pressure, parents' pressure. That is what Swamiji is telling. Attempts have been made to suppress it. This is what the attempts are there, to suppress it. To put a stop to the unrest of the mind. Unrest is there in the mind. I must struggle. Which asks, what is beyond? What is real? You understand? That which is real is beyond, because it does not die. So what is beyond? What is real? But let them suppress it. But as long as death remains, all these attempts at suppression will always prove to be unsuccessful. You have to face death, and then the question cannot stop. We may talk about seeing nothing beyond and keeping all our hopes and aspirations confined to the present moment. We may talk about, and struggle hard not to think of anything beyond the world of senses. And perhaps everything outside helps to keep us limited within its as narrow bounds. Everything outside means tempting objects. Everything outside today means media. Everything outside today means society and pressure. The whole world may combine to prevent us from broadening out beyond the present. Broadening out. Yet, so long as there is death, the question must come again and again. Is that the end of all these things in which we are clinging, to which we are clinging? As if they were the most real of all realities, the most substantial of all substances. So the world is neither real nor substantial. We feel it is real, we feel it is substantial, and we don't want to go beyond. The world vanishes in a moment and is gone. Death means the world vanishes in a moment and is gone. Swamiji has given a simile. Standing on the brink of a precipice, beyond which is the infinite yawning chasm, hollow beyond. Precipice, the end of a mountain, beyond which there is valley, chasm. And there we are standing. Every mind, however hardened, is bound to recoil and ask, is this real? However hardened, by thinking of the world, we have hardened our mind. But when we face death, this question comes. The hopes of a lifetime, built up little by little with all the energies of a great mind. Great minds are struggling only to make the world better. Hopes of a lifetime built up little by little with all the energies of a great mind vanish in a second. Are they real? This question must be answered. Time never lessens its power. On the other hand, it adds strength to it. Because the death comes repeatedly, we cannot forget that question. Now, in these days of Corona, whole race is struggling. Then there is the desire to be happy. Second point. First point is death compels us to think whether the world is real or not. And what is real? It is beyond how to struggle for it. Second point is all our struggle in this world is for happiness. And Swamiji has told in the first page of Karma Yoga that pleasure cannot be the goal of life. Knowledge only is the goal of life. Because pleasure is never permanent. Knowledge is permanent. So, but we are struggling for pleasure. Then there is the desire to be happy. That desire is always there. Why the desire is there? Because the supreme bliss is already ours. Supreme bliss which is beyond the senses, beyond the mind, beyond ego, which is existence, knowledge, bliss, is already our real nature. But we do not know it. And so the struggle to be happy outside comes. Then there is a desire to be happy. We run after everything to make ourselves happy. Run after everything. One of my teachers used to say, man is a beggar and is begging, oh money give me happiness, oh wife give me happiness, oh husband give me happiness. Man is begging. We pursue our mad career in the external world of senses. That is called career. Nothing but external world of senses. Swamiji's language is very strong. Because Swamiji is lifting our minds up. If you ask the young man with whom life is successful, he will declare that it is real because he is having happiness. And he really thinks so. Perhaps when the same man grows old and finds fortune ever eluding him, he will then declare that it is fate. Fate. I do not know what is happening. He finds at last that his desires cannot be fulfilled. No desire in the world can have a permanent answer. Wherever he goes, there is an adamantine wall beyond which he cannot pass. The limited world is the adamantine wall. Every sense activity results in a reaction. That is another thing. Every sense activity results in a reaction. Everything is evanescent. That is the word Swamiji is using. Evanescent. Kshanabhangur is the Sanskrit word. Not only Nashwar, but Kshanabhangur. Evanescent. Evanescent is that which vanishes even while looking at it. Enjoyment, misery, luxury, wealth, power, and poverty, even life itself, are all evanescent. So the facts of life and the life itself vanishes in a day. So everything is evanescent. We want something permanent. Now at this point, two positions remain to mankind. One is to believe with the nihilist, philosophical positions, not the position of enjoyment. Because we have seen the world is evanescent. Now if we allow our buddhi to freely go, it ends in nihilism. It ends by telling us that nothing is real. Everything is zero. If brain is given a free rein, unattached, then it ends in nihilism. One is to believe the nihilist, that all is nothing, that we know nothing, that we can never know anything, either about the future, the past, or even the present. Agnosticism leading to nihilism. For we must remember that he who denies the past and the future and wants to stick to the present is simply a madman. Don't think of the past, don't think of the future, remain in the present. One may as well deny the father and mother and assert the child. It would be equally logical. To deny the past and future, the present must inevitably be denied also. This is one position, that everything is zero. That of the nihilist. Now Swamiji is replying, philosophy is all right. I have never seen a man who could really become a nihilist for 1 minute. It is very easy to talk. So nihilism is in our talk. If does a man actually believe in nihilism, then why he lives? So even 1 minute we cannot be nihilist inside. Then there is the other position, to seek for an explanation. That means this apparently unreal thing, we must see what is real. We must go beyond our senses to find that is real. That is the real man. To seek for the real, to discover in the midst of this eternally changing and evanescent world what is real. Within this world, we have to find out what is real. Discover. That means it is there, very much there, but it lies covered by our ignorance. If we can find out, it will be like discovering it. In this body, which is an aggregate of molecules of matter, so we start with ourselves. Body is an aggregate of molecules of matter. Is there anything which is real? Body has not been real. This has been the search throughout the history of the human mind. In the very oldest times, you often find glimpses of light coming into man's mind. This is awakening. Swamiji calls it glimpses of light. We find man, even then, going a step beyond this body, finding something which is not this external body, although very much like it. In the necessity of religion, some we have discussed Egyptians and others, why they make those mummies, because they want to preserve the body, because there is some double of the body. Not the external body, although very much like it, much more complete, much more perfect, and which remains even when the body is dissolved. We read in the hymns of the Rig Veda, addressed to the god of fire, who is burning a dead body. Carry him, O fire. Body is being burned, but there is something there. So, O fire, carry him, O fire, in your arms gently. Give him a perfect body, a bright body. Carry him where the fathers live, where there is no more sorrow, where there is no more death. So this is the concept of the Pitriloka. The same idea you will find present in every religion. That is Swamiji's beauty. He is not sticking to Upanishads. All religions, Swamiji tells, finds out this, that there is something subtler than the body, brighter than the body, different from the body, and which remains even when the body dies. The same idea will find present in every religion, and we get another idea with it. It is a significant fact that all religions, without one exception, hold that man is a degeneration of what he was. So when you find this double, there is another thing we find, that man was originally not like this. He has become like this. He must go back to what he originally was. So, not only real, but our real nature. And today we are not finding our real nature. So that idea comes by looking into all religions. Whether they clothe this in mythological words, or in the clear language of philosophy, or in the beautiful expressions of poetry, this is the one fact that comes out of every scripture and of every mythology, that the man that is a degeneration of what he was. This is the kernel of truth which within the story of Adam's fall in the Jewish scriptures. The Christian scriptures before that are the Jewish scriptures in the Western world. And there is a mythology in the Jewish scriptures, and there this description we find Adam's fall. You know, there is Adam and there is Eve, and they were in the Garden of Heaven, and they were asked not to eat the fruit thereof. But they were tempted and ate the fruit, and they fell down. That is the story. That means when the subject-object enjoyment is done, man loses his original nature. That is the meaning of that story. This is again and again repeated in the scriptures of the Hindus. The dream of a period which they call the age of truth, Satyayug, when no man died unless he wished to die, when he could keep his body as long as he liked, and his mind was pure and strong. This is the Satyayug. There was no evil and no misery, and the present age is a corruption of that state of perfection. Satyayug, then this Yuga, then Dwapar Yuga, and then Kali Yuga, like that we imagine. Side by side with this, we find the story of the deluge everywhere. So the whole world goes away and is newly born is also in every religion, religious mythology. Swamiji is trying to go beyond and find the truth for us. So this world vanishes. What happens? That story itself is a proof that this present age is held to be a corruption of a former age by every religion. It went on becoming more and more corrupt until the deluge swept away a large portion of mankind, and again the ascending series began. In our concept, when the Brahma makes the world, it is externalization, and the externalization goes on increasing and destroys the world. So it has to be made again. It went on becoming more and more corrupt until the deluge swept away a large portion of mankind, and again the ascending series began. It is going up slowly again to reach once more that early state of purity. You are all aware of the story of the deluge in the Old Testament. The Jewish portion of the Bible is called Old Testament. The same story was current among the ancient Babylonians, the Egyptians, the Chinese and the Hindus. Now he is telling the Hindu version of the story. Manu, a great ancient sage, was praying on the banks of the Ganga when a little minnow came to him for protection. Minnow, small fish. And he put it into a pot of water he had before him, commanded. What do you want? Asked Manu. The little minnow declared he was pursued by a bigger fish and wanted protection. Manu carried the little fish to his house, and in the morning he had become as big as the pot, and said, I cannot live in this pot any longer. Swamiji has told this is mythological language. Manu put him in a tank, and the next day he was as big as the tank and declared he could not live there anymore. So Manu had to take him to a river, and in the morning the fish filled the river. Then Manu put him in the ocean, and he declared, Manu, I am the creator of this universe. Matsya Avatar. I have taken this form to come and warn you that I will deluge the world. In Indian philosophy, the destruction is caused by God himself. You do not require a devil for it, because the world is not real. You build an ark. Ark means a big boat. And in it put a pair of every kind of animals, and let your family enter the ark. And there will project out of the water my horn. Fasten the ark to it, and when the deluge subsides, come out and people the earth. So the world was deluged, and Manu saved his own family and 2 of every kind of animal couple, and seeds of every plant. When the deluge subsided, he came and peopled the world, and we are all called man because we are the progeny of Manu. The very word man has come from Manu. Manushya, Manav. Manav means the progeny of Manu. And that Manav itself has become man in English or Manushya in other languages. Now, human language is the attempt to express the truth that is within. I am fully persuaded that a baby whose language consists of unintelligible sounds is attempting to express the highest philosophy. Only the baby has not the organs to express it, nor the means. The difference between the language of the highest philosophers and the utterances of babies is one of degree and not of kind. What you call the most correct, systematic, mathematical language of the present time and the hazy, mystical, mythological language of the ancients differ only in degree. All of them have a grand idea behind, which is as it were struggling to express itself. And often behind these ancient mythologies are nuggets of truth. Often. And often, I am sorry to say, behind the fine polished phrases of the moderns is ancient iron trash. Language is perfect, but what they are expressing is nothing. And the mythological language may not be good, but what they are trying to express is eternal truths. In this respect, I may add something. The Vedanta was flourishing, and the great Shankaracharya spread out throughout India. And in Bengal there was Tantricism. And because of the superiority of Vedanta, he proved that everywhere. But the Bengalis did not take it like that. They thought that because of his superior intelligence, analytical powers, he has defeated us. And so a reaction came. I am reading out from Shri Ramakrishna Leela Prasanga, please. Sardan Swami is telling this. And they developed a new logic. And that is called Navya Nyaya, developed at Navadvip. And through that logic, they took up some Vedantic book and showed that every sentence is logically incorrect. Now the Vedantis had to react, and they proved that that book, Shatadushani, showing 100 parts, in that book every word is incorrect. And that book was, their book was called Khandana Khandakadya. Now since then what happened? That Vedantis tried to put their language logical, and it has destroyed Vedanta. All the books of the 14th century are only words. It took Vedanta away from experience. Shankar does not require that language. His disciples do not require that language. It was in the 14th century. Book like Vedanta Paribhasha. So, the book which I am trying to take from this Wednesday, Vedanta Sar, it is the only book of the 14th century which is free from the influence of this type of language. And so, Vedanta has to be made. Swamiji said, Vedanta has to be made free from the ancient caves and all that. Today, Vedanta requires to be freed from this language. And Vedanta has to be brought back to the original Upanishads and Shankar's commentary and Swamiji's commentary on it. Anyway, so this is a fact about language. You may be logical, but what they are trying to express, you try to see. All of them have a grand idea behind. And I am sorry to say, behind the fine polished phrases of the moderns is iron trash. So we need not throw a thing overboard because it is closed in mythology, because it does not fit in with the notions of Mr. So-and-so and Mrs. So-and-so of modern times. If people should laugh at religion because most religions declare that men must believe in mythology taught by such and such a prophet, they ought to laugh more at these moderners. In modern times, if a man quotes a Moses or a Buddha or a Christ, he is laughed at. But let him give the name of a Huxley, a Tyndall or a Darwin, and it is swallowed without salt. The great names of science. Huxley has said it, that is enough for many. We are free from superstitions indeed. That was a religious superstition, and this is a scientific superstition. Only in and through that superstition came life-giving ideas of spirituality. In and through this modern superstition come lust and greed. Kamini kanchan, kama kanchan. All this language ends in this. Very, very direct Swamiji that time. That superstition was worship of God, and the superstition is worship of filthy lucre of fame or power. That is the difference. If not lust and greed, then fame and power. That is the difference. To return to mythology, while talking of mythology, because the language is different type, Swami has to tell this. Now, to return to mythology, behind all these stories we find one idea standing supreme, that man is a degeneration of what he was. This seems to be the main point to discuss, and Swamiji tells it. I think we can still go on for 5 minutes. This is from the religion. Coming to the present times, modern research seems to repudiate this position absolutely. Darwinian evolution. Evolutionists seem to contradict entirely this assertion. According to them, man is the evolution of the mollusk, and therefore what mythology states cannot be true. There is in India, however, a mythology which is able to reconcile both these positions. Reconcile, not rejecting the modern ideas, but neither rejecting the old mythologies also. And that is, the Indian mythology has a theory of cycles. We call it kalpa. That means the whole world becomes involuted and then evolution comes. That is Swamiji's logic, beautiful logic. That all progression is in the form of wave. Every wave is attended by a fall, and that by a rise in the next moment, that by a fall in the next, and again another rise. The motion is in cycles. Certainly it is true, even on the grounds of modern research, that man cannot be simply an evolution. Because what is science tells us, every evolution presupposes an involution. The modern scientific man will tell you that you can only get the amount of energy out of a machine which you have previously put into it. Something cannot be produced out of nothing. So evolution. If a man is an evolution of the mollusk, then the perfect man. Man is not the complete evolution. The perfect man, the Buddha man, the Christ man, was involved in the mollusk. If it is not so, whence come these gigantic personalities? Something cannot come out of nothing. Thus we are in the position of reconciling the scriptures with modern light. That energy which manifests itself slowly through the various stages until it becomes the perfect man cannot come out of nothing. It existed somewhere. And if the mollusk or the protoplasm is the first point to which you can trace it, that protoplasm somehow or other must have contained the energy. So the cyclic theory is the most scientific and also the correct mythology. Now, another beautiful point in respect of this, Swamiji will discuss in the next term. Swamiji is lifting our minds and making the correct logic only in the lifted mind. What we call logic is due to our attachment to the senses. Om Paratatve Sada Lino Ramakrishna Samagyaya Yo Dharma Sthapana Rato Viresham Tam Namamyam Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Shri Ramakrishna Arpanamastu.